Keep right with Ralph K. Ginorio. Indefatigable. Here at last, here at last. Thank God Almighty, Election Day 2024 is here at last. The will of enfranchised Americans is, as this column will be published on Tuesday, the 5th of November, being expressed. Afterwards, we can dust ourselves off and, win or lose, bask in the functionality of our republic as we wish the winners the best of fortune until the next election. If only this were true. As I write, none of us knows how the various elections and ballot initiatives will fare nationwide, statewide, or locally. In better times, this would be a matter well worth our attention, but not today. In the United States of 2024, we are beset at all levels by nothing less than an evolutionary communist movement. There can be no reasonable assurance that today's Democratic Party will abide constitutional limits to its ambitions. Since the turning of the Third Millennium, we who are constitutionalists rather than utopians have been besieged by Marxists and their fellow travelers. In academe, entertainment, journalism, the bureaucracy, and elected office, each agent of change has done their best to erode traditions and undermine institutions that have made both America and Western civilization great. The last time that Democrats were fully committed to victory in a war was when German tanks were within eyesight of the Kremlin. Democrats have never advocated policies oriented to bring prosperity to everyday Americans. Instead of a dynamic and vital free market which enriches all Americans, today's Democrats push ubiquitous Soviet-style central planning and regulation in the name of environmentalism. This is because success is not their objective. Control is their goal. Control over our actions, our choices, words, and even our thoughts. Victory and prosperity inspire a bold self-confidence in citizens from all backgrounds. Successful Americans resist the machinations of the left because successful people do not need or want a meddlesome, hectoring, and intrusive government. Only when we are afraid, depressed, and desperate, will independent free adults even consider trading away some of their freedom in return for what is presented as security. Only when the dread of conquest, plague, or famine is presented as inevitable, and inescapable will the psyches of a critical mass of citizens buckle sufficiently to willingly put on the slave collar of tyranny. Only when we believe that we have utterly failed as adults will we eagerly cooperate in our own infantilization. Today's Democrats are no longer interested in the give and take that has characterized most of the history of the United States. Since Bush v. Gore 2000, Democrats have increasingly refused to concede electoral defeat. Instead, they employ every effort to flood elections with fraudulent votes meant to steal every close election. The whole point of importing over 20 million illegal aliens is to get these unacculturated invaders to vote Democrat. Given the lax election security in most blue states, coupled with the mass settlement of illegals in swing states, they might even succeed. Since at least 2016, Democrats have broken all traditions of loyal opposition. Far from according President Trump any kind of honeymoon period, lawfare was immediately commenced against him and his administration. Russian hoaxes, the Mueller report, and multiple bogus House impeachments were waged to distract Trump from implementing his agenda. At best, the massive COVID-induced insecurities in the 2020 election call its results into question. I have never been persuaded by experts who immediately opined that claims of election fraud were baseless. These statements, legitimizing what may very well have been a stolen presidential election, were made without any time for serious and systematic examination of these claims. After Biden and Harris assumed office, there have been intensifying talk there has been intensifying talk of packing the United States Supreme Court, scrapping the Electoral College, adding Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. as states, eliminating the senatorial filibuster, and other efforts to topple our constitutional order. Instead of perpetuating Montesquieu's brilliant separation of powers between our government's legislative, executive, and judicial branches, as well as local, state, and federal levels of government, today's Democrats want one all-powerful central government to rule us all, with nothing between it and us. Any doubt of their ambitions to destroy constitutional limited government and the two-party system have been dispelled by the relentless campaign to redefine Trump, Republicans, traditional men and women, parents, and anyone else who opposes them as Nazis. It really is impossible to make peace with people who make such claims. Contrary to their assertions, it is their communist tendencies which poses the greatest threat to our democracy. Unfortunately, as long as these Marxists remain leaders within today's Democrat Party, we cannot come together after this election in peace and reconciliation. Whether we win or lose today's election, we must continue to fight, fight, fight. No matter how exhausted we are, we must be indefatigable as we defend our federal constitutional republic against all enemies, foreign or domestic.